listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, and welcome you to episode number 47. Today's guest is Chris Carberg, the founder and CEO of AddictionHelp.com, one of the fastest growing addiction, behavioral, and mental health education brands. Chris has been in recovery for over 18 years. That is amazing. And is a founder of several health-related brands, including postpartumdepression.org. His passion is to make AddictionHelp.com the largest and most helpful content platform for people seeking addiction help, as well as their loved ones, with a special emphasis on those looking for that long-term recovery. Chris lives in Orlando, Florida, with his amazing wife, Jenna, and their 2 children. Now, in this episode, I love how, we start off a little behind the scenes with a little bit of laughter and humor and some transparency, maybe a little TMI, you'll have to see. And we have some fun talking about some really hard topics. We share our passions, our stories, and what each of us envision to be success in the industry, hope and healing. If you want a behind-the-scenes peek of what it's like to be a guest on Coffee and Conversation podcast, make sure you stay tuned until the end as Chris shares his experience as a guest, which, I'm going to be honest, brought tears to my eyes. I needed that gift today. Thank you, Chris, for that gift. So stay tuned. Okay, enough of this. Let's do it. But first, let's remember those 3 C's of engagement. The first one is click that subscribe button and make sure you turn on notifications so that you do not miss future episodes. 2, commit to staying for the full episode. I mean, really, we talk about so many different topics. You will miss out if you don't stay until the end, and you won't know how to register for the giveaway. And then the 3rd C is what? Well, coffee, of course. So sit back, relax, and fill up your coffee, and let's get started. So it's already recording. I'll clip this unless I think it's funny enough, and then I'll leave it in. In the beginning, when I first, and so this is how I'll kick off. So if I decide to keep this in, listeners, I haven't even said hi to Chris yet, and I'm about to tell him a very TMI moment. So earlier on in the podcast, when we were just doing audio, I was interviewing this individual who was sharing her very, very hard personal recovery story. Okay. I'm not sure what I had eaten before church that day or what had happened, but I had to go to the bathroom so badly. And my stomach's gurgling and she's talking. And so I told her, I said, okay, look, I want you to just keep talking. I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'll come back. So I'm hoping we don't have a revisit of that because my stomach was gurgling just 5 minutes before joining. And I thought, okay, we're video now. I can't just
you
can't put up
escape.
A sign.
Right.
I can't just say, Ange has gone to the bathroom. Just continue on as if I'm still here. So,
Right.
So that's a little about my personality, Chris. It's so great to meet you.
I love it. It's so good to meet you as well. And yeah, as I said, I'm excited to be here, and I'm sure there's something we can cut if the moment arises.
See, I mean, I'm all about enjoying all of the fun and the laughs and all of that. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm not going to worry about it too much.
No,
We're just going to go.
I agree. No, I think it's fun that way. And it's life happens, and it gives I think it gives a little bit more of a glimpse sometimes into real people being real and genuine and, that as opposed to this kind of, buttoned up sort of thing where it's like, is that really you? Come on. Is that you when this is not recording? It's like, I think people want real,
I love that you said that. And yes, this is real. One of the things I was telling one of my friends recently, though, is a beauty of doing the podcast and watching yourself. I also learned some of my own tics. So, for example, I scratch a lot when and I was catching myself as you were saying those things, and we were just laughing. We were like, that's the part of being humans. Speaking about humans, why don't we just dive in? It looks like you're a pro at this, so I don't have to do any of the normal things I would say. I will give a little caveats, and also so the listeners have already heard this, because when they're listening to us, they've already heard the intro. But I will, after recording this, I will record the intro, and I will include any appropriate trigger warnings so that listeners can be set up for success when they listen to our interview. And I say that just because I want you, Chris, to be able to, we have so much we could talk about all the amazing work that you're doing. And I'm not sure where we will meander today,
right? Yeah.
But at no point do you feel like you need to hold back. This is your story, and I'm super excited to hear it.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that you do that, because I do know sometimes you start down a path of how you're going to tell something, and then all of a sudden, it hits you and you're like, do I go here? And it's like the more times you can say yes to that, I think the better. So it's always good, I think, to share things for the most part. By and large, I've always felt that way too.
Well, why don't we dig in? And I am going to allow you to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself and why you're here today.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Carberg. And every time I say my name, I've been having a harder time saying it lately, and I don't know why. I've said it my whole life, I think, but it's like this. Ever since I started recording with this mic, I hear it almost like a da, and not my full name, but it's like Chris Carberg. So
Chris
my
Carberg.
name is.
Chris
I don't
Carberg,
ever,
right?
Yeah, it's like Chris Carberg, and so anyhow, that's what I hear now. But no, So I'm Chris. I am the co-founder of addictionhelp.com, and I've been in recovery since 2005, February of 2005. And, I've been for the past, over 15 years, I've been involved in kind of coming up with digital products and ways kind of to reach people with various stories, whether it's I've done some stuff with different types of health. My wife had postpartum depression. We created a website that was focused on that, postpartumdepression.org. And I founded a number of sites in the addiction space, addiction education and community buildings kind of stuff. And then stepped away from it for a little bit because I wasn't really involved with the folks that owned those properties at the time. And so came back and wanted to build something meaningful that it's very personal to me. It's not just like a business model. And so we've built addictionhelp.com, launched a couple of years ago. We've been working really hard on kind of expanding the footprint of that, and we're seeing about 100,000 or so visitors per month now. And
wow.
It's exciting to see. I keep saying 100,000 users per month, and I'm like, I have to fix how I say that, because
yes.
I'm like, it's like, I don't want people to think it's 100,000. It may be. I'd be fine with that. I would love that. But it may also be family members. So I'm like, I can't use that term. But yeah, so we do a lot of educational content. We have about 350 or so pages of content that are focused on different types of addiction and different mental health issues. We co-founded it with Dr. Kent S. Hoffman, who is a board certified addiction specialist and a dear friend. And so he's been involved on the medical side as we've been building that out. We've been building our podcast and video kind of platform, and working on kind of what I'm calling an ethical directory, just because I've seen a lot of these automated directories that are out there that are just kind of like, they just scrape the web. They just scrape the content, throw it on a page, and it ranks in Google. Next thing you know, people are placing phone calls from it. And most of the websites that are out there are very involved in like selling phone calls. They sell people's information, and I'm very against it. And So yeah, so we've been like trying to build up slowly, because to build up slowly, I think, gives us a bit of control in how, the type of things that we're willing to do for revenue. It's as opposed to some of the things I've seen in the past that have really kind of turned me off.
I love that. There's so much to unpack in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
First off, I did read, and I'm going to increase the lighting in my room. So I'm going to keep talking while I do that, though. We'll
I don't know. I can hear you still.
This is going to be, if someone wants to look at what's the most unprofessional podcast episode, I'm just going to record. Here we go. So I was looking at your bio and refreshing my memory on it. I was super excited when you reached out, because obviously our missions are so aligned.
Yeah.
And, a third of the mission of Recovery Advocate Network is reducing the stigma and providing education and connecting people together to appropriate other resources. And so I loved that component of it. And then I read the postpartum depression, and I thought, well, that's amazing to be so involved with that, because I had to make the assumption either you had some significant mother, parent, something, I want to be appropriate in that way, but some significant individual who'd really struggled with that, and you saw the impact. And I think that area is still one that has so much stigma around it, as if it's not a real thing. And it is there's so much science behind it. It's such a real thing.
It really is. And it's one of the saddest things when not saddest, because I think there's a part of this is great, but we get, Jenna, my wife, Jenna, went through severe postpartum depression with the birth of our first child. And, we've always joked that out of the two of us, she's the sane one. And so when I started seeing her act like me, I was like, this is first off, at the time I didn't realize what was going on, but she was the steady rock, and she still is. But for the 9 months that she went through that, it was harrowing. I mean, it was probably the most traumatic aspect of anything that I've ever gone through. Just walking that with her. And then we get lots of people who reach out to us on the site, and it's awesome. Since we launched that, I think we've had about probably 750,000 visitors or so. And, all of it connects to the National Suicide Hotline, to different resources that are out there from, postpartum.net, some amazing things that are out there. But we get a lot of emails from people just that are going through it. And one of the things that stands out a lot of the times is people saying, my spouse or my partner doesn't think this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Or my mom doesn't think this is a real thing. What can I do to convince? And I'm thinking, you're in the midst of, first off, trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And you're at the same time, you're trying to pitch it to your parents, to your loved ones. And I don't know any other mental illness that kind of forces you to do that, where you're having to, for the fight of your life and trying to barely keep treading water. And at the same time, you're having to almost like do a marketing pitch to your loved ones to prove to them that it's a real thing. And now we also have seen an increase, though, in people reaching out who are loved ones. And that's something that's different from when we launched it. I launched it while Jenna was going through it. And it was a coping mechanism to try and be like, I don't understand this thing. Obviously, if we can build a kind of a digital playground and a digital playground for this, for people to come in, feel like safe to just kind of poke around, ask questions, that maybe that'll teach me as I'm kind of walking through it. And it was very helpful. But yeah, it is one of the most misunderstood. It is, the stigma is there. In fact, I think there's going to be, we've been trying to figure out like how we can have the kind of the crossover content on addictionhelp.com. And we've been working on, there's an entire kind of maternal health section that we're building out that is just so necessary because of the stressors that are on new moms today, on top of what they're going through with that. Then you get in mom groups, and there is a level of stress and anxiety that like just I was shocked kind of to learn about, just the amount of pressure of how you're raising your baby, how
Oh
you're
my gosh. And no matter what you're
terrifying.
doing, someone is going to very quickly tell you you're doing it wrong.
Totally. Oh yeah, yeah. People who you just think are like, who are usually like your friends and stuff, all of a sudden turn, and it's all, again, it's kind of masked in this, we just want what's best for you, but
Right.
it's a very manipulative, like awful thing. So yeah, so you're spot on though. Like it was that whole site was honestly just, I've tried to use these creating these, we call them products because ultimately that's what we hope they become. But building these things, it's all based around like, how do I wrap my mind around this? How do I process it? How can I explain it to a loved one? I didn't find out until about 3 or 4 years ago, in my work after being sober for this long, that I, was borderline personality disorder, and had that, and started doing dialectical behavioral therapy and things like that. And so you constantly are, I think, hitting on like new things that you encounter. And I think that by finding a way to teach it to others, you're really teaching yourself in the process. It allows you to kind of learn about it. And so that's kind of what we try to practice, what we preach there, which is just the more you can understand it and explain it to someone else, whether it's you going through it or a loved one, the better, the more likely you'll be able to make a sound decision, because it can be a really chaotic situation when you have to make a decision.
Oh, I love that. And we just released on Wednesday, January 24th. So we released for this podcast, we release 2 episodes a week. Every Saturday, we release an interview such as this. So this will be released on a Saturday in the future. And then every Wednesday, we release an episode in our Between the Lines series. And the Between the Lines series is a blog club series where individuals will write blogs because they want to use their written words instead of their vocal words. And then either myself or some actors or actresses or other board members will read those blog posts on Wednesday. So they're shorter episodes, typically 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I've seen them.
And, yeah. So the one I love in thinking about postpartum depression, and I would actually challenge back, I think there are several things that are similar to postpartum depression that I hear from people that say they're having to get people to believe this is a real thing. When I think of even like chronic pain, and I'm thinking about that, going back to the Between the Lines episode, which was episode 42, and it was on invisible disabilities. Yeah. And Shane did an amazing job describing the impact and the challenge of invisible disabilities, because it is something that's not super obvious. You don't have a wheelchair. Right. So people aren't opening doors for you and saying, let me help make this easier for you.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. Instead, they're kind of like holding doors closed.
I know. No, you're spot on. It's definitely, I think that the part that makes it semi-unique with the postpartum side, I think, is the emergent nature, that you're kind of in this emergency, this emergency situation that a lot of times, unfortunately, ends with, especially if it's a postpartum psychosis, with suicide or in awful circumstances, infanticide. Like there are some, and so I think it's, no, you're exactly, because after I said that, I started thinking about the million things that I've explained to people over the years that are, these are real things. The thing I love about it
is that it's very easy for us to think as individuals that to put things in silos. And the thing I love about hearing this and thinking about these scenarios, and I hope listeners take away, is the more stories and the more information and the more people are willing to be vulnerable, like you said, the more it meanders and you're able to say, yes, I'm willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and share, this is how this scenario impacts my life, then I think the more people find, first, there are so many other people out there that are
Yeah,
just like you. You are not alone. I know you feel alone.
absolutely.
You feel like you are right now. You are not alone. And then secondly, the more voices we get out, and even interviews like this that a family
Hmm.
member can watch and see from someone other than the person who's struggling, because it is not fair. Like, no one who has a wheelchair has to constantly go and defend the reason they need a wheelchair ramp.
Completely. Hmm.
And yet in these instances, and especially like postpartum depression period as well, when you're sleep deprived, the human body has gone through
Absolutely.
so much change. And then you also, I know I felt very lucky. I was severely abused as a child by my
Hmm.
mother. And so I thought, I never want to be a mother. And then when I finally got to be a mother, um, a couple of things happened.
Yeah.
One, I had a lot more compassion for her because I knew she had mental health challenges to not be able
Hmm.
to care and nurture me in the way that an infant needs to be cared and nurtured for, right? So I
Sure.
had
Sure.
understanding of that. And also had gratitude that I did not have those struggles, and I was able to
Hmm.
give those nurturing times to my daughter in that infant stage. So when you
Yeah.
talk about the critical time period, right? It is impacting an entire family, not just one individual. It's
Yeah.
impacting the child, bonding, nurturing, and really as a mother and as a human, I mean, you
Hmm.
want to take care of all of those people in your family. It's kind of
You
like your
do.
job.
Yeah. It's so true. And one of the other parts is the reason some people don't want to recognize it is because of the fear they have of it also. So there's the part where they're like, you're faking it. And then there's the other people who are like, I don't want to hear the words that you have this. Because I know there are, there's some people who actually do grasp, like, but not my kid, not my kid. No, um, and so you're actually trying to convince them to accept that this is happening, and it's like so that we can all kind of cope with this in the same time period. And I've also seen that in other cases with some of the more intense other intense mental illness, whether it's schizophrenia, where you're trying to talk to a parent about it, and the fear is the stigma that comes with what that means for them. Because then
Yes.
once they accept that, then that means I'm going to have to walk down this path, and it can be really terrifying. So you have like a percentage of your audience that are saying, I don't believe it, and then you have the other half who are scared out of their mind that what this could mean. And you have a person who's battling this in the middle, trying to just express it. And in some cases, like, it was me doing the expressing. So like Jenna was not in the place where she could not express it to somebody. And then, but a lot of times I think just starting off with, we would talk about the baby blues, and about, you know I think when we got into some of the data and explained like what percentage of new moms that this impacted, and what it means that there's postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, postpartum panic disorder. There's all of these other little pieces. And I think the postpartum depression thing, why we chose to use that word as the website name, is that it's colloquial. It's all inclusive of it, no different than we do with addiction on
Right,
addictionhelp.com.
right.
It's the idea of, okay, I'm not expecting so and so to understand postpartum panic versus postpartum anxiety, but I can maybe get them to understand postpartum depression is a serious collection of issues that a new mom is experiencing. Maybe I can come in that way. Same thing with addiction, I think. So we try to like go on those kind of ride on the colloquial, allow people, because when I don't know, you probably have in some of your interviews have experienced this, where there's a lot of new terminology for everything,
Yes.
and I'm all for, using language that makes people feel safe and makes them feel comfortable. But at the same time, I don't want to sacrifice the clear understanding, because a lot of times I don't know if I can get someone to understand, an opioid use disorder versus addiction. Sometimes, sometimes when you're trying to share it with other people to help them to understand those kind of tried and true ones, the reason why they're successful in terms of breaking through to people is because we've all, as a kind of a culture, accepted that I kind of identify what that means. And so these other ones are going to take time and patience. And that, if someone's in a group and they use the wrong term, we don't need to jump on them. There's a way to, I think, do it that is compassionate and also, helpful to the community at large. And most of the times, I think that's on a one-to-one basis, as opposed to kind of dogpiling on social media. If someone does something different or something. But I noticed that happening more and more, where, we're kind of splitting hairs constantly on, as we're dealing with something so traumatic, and it's oftentimes not the person who's in it right then and there. And it's like, we got to remember there's someone who's in it right now, and we're trying to give them another day. We're trying to get them
some hope. Yes.
And it's the last thing they need is all of us arguing over, the dad called it alcoholism. They said they're an alcoholic. We don't think you're an alcoholic. You have alcohol use disorder. And I get it. I do. It's just like, so what we try to always balance the terminologies, because when people search on Google, and as I kind of shared with you, my background being, in search engine optimization, I want to meet people where they are. So if a person is searching, they're going to oftentimes use this tried and true terminology.
Absolutely.
It's like, and then they're looking for that when they reach the page. Am I in the right spot? And so if there's a whole different set of terminology when they land, it's like, I don't have that, that's not what I'm dealing with. Let me go somewhere else. And I'm concerned about some of the websites that are out there that people land on, because I know the motives. I know I've had the misfortune of being involved with some of these before in the past, of knowing people who run some of these that are not necessarily on the up and up, and really, really in this for the right reason. So it's just, I think that's why we are trying constantly to just err on the side of, we want to be accurate with our information, but we also want to have grace. We want to have grace in terms of the terminology.
I love that. Yeah, the word grace. I love that part, because I think also there can be, of course, there are different views, different perspectives. And one phrase I love is for everyone to just take a step back and say, what does success look like in this interaction? Success looks like you finding the information that you and your loved ones need to live a more healthy, quality, fun, passion, joyful life. That's what success looks like.
Yeah.
And that success path may look a little different in a lot of different areas, but we definitely don't want to exclude in some of those areas. I think too, there's this thing where, and I will say I'm a little passionate about trying to figure out ways to educate people kindly if they say, for example, someone committed suicide. Okay, so that is one of my things. I strongly dislike that phrase, and even in the medical community, I've talked with my psychiatrist about this, and he's like, I hate that phrase. Like, if we could get that out of, and then said, die by, there are lots of different ways to say it.
Yes.
So what's interesting that I find, and I want to encourage more people to do, not that I'm perfect, because I'm not, but I've had this experience many times. I've had the opportunity to talk with other individuals who, because that phrase has just been ingrained in our head, then on a one-on-one basis, I've been able to walk them through, okay, here are some reasons to perhaps consider it a different way. And what's beautiful about that is that you said it perfectly, grace, right? We want to give people hope. And then we also want to provide grace in these areas. And so what's beautiful is the number of times that individual has just said, wow, I never even thought about it that way. It makes so much sense.
Very much so. People are, and that's, I think sometimes people get the wrong idea that others are unwilling to change or to consider these ideas. I think they are oftentimes far more concerned than about saying the wrong thing than we give them credit for. I certainly know that when we're talking, and I think the example of committing suicide is a great example. And as it is going to be when you suggest, of the example of died by, for instance, that is a changing language is very, very challenging, but it is oftentimes spread in a singular basis, one to one, and you say it once, and then the next thing you know, okay, now the next time I use this term, or a person is going to therapy and their therapist is using that terminology, it changes how they're able to do it. And I do think that change can be affected on a one-to-one basis, the kind of discipleship oriented mindset of, hey, let me give you some some other ideas. And we've seen it, by the way, like on our site, like when we've been writing and building out content for 2.5 years now. We've begun now going back through all the content we've written to look for our, not necessarily the inaccuracies, because I feel like that we've got a strong base there, but where can we explain this in um, a more helpful way? And so if a person is struggling, we've used the term, suffering from addiction. Uh, have we've switched sometimes to using battling, or as opposed to struggling. So battling gives a little bit more hope that the person is actually waging a battle, as opposed, because I think I know for myself, before I got sober, I was waging a battle, and it was silent. No one knew it, because I kept falling back into my addiction. But there was a battle going on, and there is a battle a lot of times going on before someone uses again. And I just think it's again, but we're seeing that ourselves, going back through to, okay, how can we explain this better? How can we, what are some better analogies? Because I do think analogies are a lot of times just Cliff's Notes, kind of quick ways for someone to wrap their mind around something. But it's like we're finding that ourselves, like at the same time. And I think the key is just constantly saying, okay, let's look at this again. I will say also, this is where AI can be useful. It's, we've created different, I would say, characters using AI on our end to test our language against, to say, and I've done this in the past with CEOs that I'm friends with, and where I want to explain something to them. And I've created like bots that are related to that person. They have their personality. I will load it up with everything I can know about them. How can I explain it to this person? And so the next thing you know, the next time
how do I get my personalized bot? That was my
Oh yeah, yes, oh yeah. You can do it, yeah. And ChatGPT, you can build different GPTs out of it, and I have different ones for like different types of people that I'm trying to reach. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, okay, what questions is what I'm saying bringing up, or making you feel put off by, based upon the characteristics that I've kind of assigned to you. So I think we do need to keep kind of pressing. I think pressing one-to-one, I think, is so important also, because when it comes top down, that's when you get people kind of digging their heels in, and they won't change, because just to, they think they're in a battle with somebody that is trying to force them into something. And I think a lot of times no, people are very willing. I've just found, by and large, everyone I've ever encountered about who I've dealt with in terms of addiction, it's a beautiful group, because it is extraordinarily diverse. It is, you're in sessions, meetings, etc., with people who have completely different lives from you, and there is a unifying factor that, weirdly enough, is a unifier. And it's so I do think that's where we can kind of improve things in the future, is just kind of trying to take that approach, like you said, of I think a quiet whisper goes a long way with people who care, because I want them to be able to hear it is always the key.
Yeah, I love that, a quiet whisper. I'm gonna steal that.
I
I
love it.
steal my
Yeah.
favorite. So I'm gonna steal that, and I'm just announcing it here. I was thinking when you were talking about the bots on episode 11, Jim and I talked about the use of AI in mental
Yeah.
health. And one of the things that we talked about was, say, for example, being able to explain something to someone in multiple different ways. So having the ability of AI to be able to see via facial recognition, okay, that person didn't get it with this vernacular. So we're going to shift in this way. And I think us as individuals, that's a great lesson to think about as well, because I know if I get frustrated that someone isn't understanding what I'm trying to say, the moment I can pause and just say, okay, let me think of a different way to express these thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences, all of these things. Because once again, going back to what we said earlier, success in these terms, success in all of this is that we build a community, we provide hope and recovery to people in all of these areas.
Sure.
And I think that's powerful. So I want to, so your what I just moved off of where I had your website, the postpartum depression website. I do want to, can you say what it is again? It's postpartum.org, I think.
It's postpartum.
So postpartumdepression.org. And listeners, we will put this in the show notes so that you can make sure that you can visit it. Okay, so now for addiction help, one of the things I wanted to dig a little deeper into is your conversation about the sites that are out there that look really nice and look really cool. However, the underlying objectives would not be the same objectives that you and I build things off of. And I will say, we're having this conversation in RAND. RAND is only a couple years old.
Yeah.
And one of the, as we mentioned, one of the arms is education, reducing the stigma. And the other part is that we are desperately trying to raise funds to be able to give grants to individuals who are in treatment and their insurance drops them. And this would allow them like an extra week or an extra something to do a healthy transition to set that up for success. And so a conversation we're having within RAN is, how do we determine what centers we partner with?
Yes.
And because several of us, every single member of RAN is 100% volunteer. None of us get paid. And we come from such diverse challenges. I mean, it's amazing. And we've all had very different experiences of like,
absolutely,
and had experiences of a place that was great, a whole new change of management. And now you're not seeing the level of healing there. So it is not an easy, I mean, we're struggling with this right now. Like, how are we going to rank? How are we going to figure out what our partnerships are and get those good collaborations? So can you give the listeners, how do you begin to go in and do that? And also towards the end of that, maybe throw in, what are some red flags that someone might observe?
Absolutely. No, it's, first off, I know this problem all too well. And it's, most of to your first comment about the sites that are out there, really what motivates a lot of sites that are offering kind of general information are who's going to pay for phone calls. Who's going to pay for phone calls? So when you go to a website and you see a phone number in the upper right-hand corner, the question of where does that go? And so now there is a way for some. Let's say a person says, I am going to allow this one treatment center to be my, sponsor, and they will answer the phone calls. That's a big moment of kind of trust, because, what you're really saying is I'm willing to accept payment from these people, because I have people calling in. Now we have, like, for instance, on addictionhelp.com, we've got monetized or unmonetized phone calls that are coming in. So all of our phone calls go to the SAMHSA National Helpline. It goes directly to that. Now I still know how many phone calls are coming in. I don't know any of the details of what they are, but I can tell you that on a regular basis, that there is, an amount that centers or individuals are paying for a phone call. They can't pay based upon if it becomes something. There are rules, naturally that there's limitations there. But a lot of the ones out there they're either buying phone calls, they're buying chats on there. If you see a live chat, it can be a third party treatment center. So when my business partner Mike Mesh and Dr. Hoffman and I all kind of came into building addictionhelp.com, the question was, what are we going to do? How are we going to not fall into this trap? The first kind of thing that we defined was, we will not sell calls. We're not going to get into this. I can't look a parent in the face and say that your kid who I sent to the wrong place and who passed away, your kid was worth $50. It's disgusting to me, the thought of that. And so we knew that, well, as trying to build this into an enterprise, we knew it would take longer, and we knew we didn't even know. We knew we just wanted to like put the content out there, and we're like, we'll figure it out later. And so we've gotten to the point now where, as we're working on building directories, we're running into the same questions that y'all have in terms of, as you're looking to decide who to partner with. The places that I start to go to, and it's funny because we've literally had discussions about this week. There are existing kind of infrastructure frameworks in place that are doing some pretty heavy, vetting, and one of them is LegitScript. So LegitScript is, after Google kind of forced out all PPC for treatment centers.
What does PPC for treatment centers mean?
Oh, good. Yeah, sure. So all the different paid ads that were showing up on Google, pay-per-click, they're called, on Google. There was a lot of money being made in Google, a person searching, rehab center near me, and there would be someone who was paying for that spot. Well, there was a significant number of scandals that had arisen from this, and bad centers were listing themselves, and Google was opening themselves up to liabilities. And so they shut down the ability to do paid ads. I want to say it was for like 6 months. And during that time, they made an arrangement with LegitScript, which essentially LegitScript, is a third party that does certain kind of validation, in terms of an ethical side, a quality side, to determine the relationship. So if you are a center that's selling phone calls, you can't do paid ads on Google anymore. And it basically, the idea was Google was going to utilize the LegitScript to kind of determine who is actually operating in an above board way. There are others, of course, other certifications and things like that. So the first thing I think anyone who's considering partnerships should do is to look at certifications, look at the certifications and verifications that exist, and determine essentially a weighting of, how do you view someone who is, is certified by LegitScript. I would say that is the fastest way to limit the potential that you're going to make, an error, because I might speak with someone and they might say the right things to me, but ultimately I'm not a accreditation arm. That's not my business model. It's not my personal gifting and strength. So I'm going to rely upon those different entities. The government side is, I would say, a very baseline one, because you can get away with a lot. You can still kind of get away with a lot, even if you're just going based on licenses. So I would say that the easiest way to determine some of these good centers are to look at which verification systems there are being used, doing manual verification on a quarterly basis of their licenses, looking at new kind of legal claims that have arisen on a quarterly basis. Now sometimes a legal claim can arise, and it may not necessarily be true. And that is possible as well. So it's like, but where there's smoke, a lot of times there's fire. And so you kind of look for those. The other thing I would say that I try to always kind of stay focused on is there's a lot of money in this business, unfortunately. And one of the other easy ways to kind of look at this is I always want to know if private equity is involved. If private equity has come into this space, and it did, it came into the rehab space hard and fast. All of these private kind of investment firms came in, took ownership stakes, loaded them up with debt. And there was a recent study that I had seen about the decrease of quality of, the quality of healthcare experience post private equity's involvement. I'd have to look up I can send you the link, but I think it was.
Send me the link, and listeners, I'll put it in the show notes so that we can watch it. Because that would be one of the other series that we're about to release. Our first episode in the series is one of the other co-founders, Dr. Ben. Mm-hmm. He and I will have a research series where we cover very legit, high-ranked research journal articles on topics that are important for the community. So our first one, we also talk about how we're selecting these articles. We're not just going in Google and finding the first thing that comes up because of someone's SEO thing. Yeah. And so that might be a great article for Dr. Ben and I to review in a future research episode.
Absolutely. It is a great way to do it. There is, I believe, I think it was by Harvard Medical School did it. And they did the coverage of the actual study. The actual study, I think, came out in December or so. But it was the December 26th, changes in adverse effects and patient outcomes associated with private equity acquisition. So, wow. What we saw, to cut to the chase, we saw a 25% increase in hospital acquired conditions. So the level of quality, the level of care.
How could you say, so because we have a very diverse audience,
sure.
How would you say that sentence in maybe another way?
No.
Hospital acquired conditions.
I know, right? Yeah. Yes. It's like, so, if you're, I always think of it through a lens of like thinking of something super, like you're in a super clean place, and, if you're in a super clean place and it's, there's no bugs everywhere and there's nothing like that. When I start to say that there's a 25% increase in the likelihood of like, let's say you're in there, just, you got a little, you had a surgery on your ankle and you're in there and all of a sudden you end up with some kind of an advanced infection. There, 25% more people are getting these kind of infections. So what I mean is it's kind of just, I always just equate it to, it's kind of grosser. It's like, I
like that technical scientific term, kind of grosser.
It totally is. And it's like, that's the, the big notes in it were, now this one's an easy one. Like, so there was a 27% increase in falls, people falling down. So wow. It's 27% more falls. So now it's like, why would that happen? Why would 27% more falls occur? Well, it means that people are not being watched carefully. They're not being guided. They're not being walked. They're not being tended to. Then you had a 38% increase in infections during blood transfusions. So these are just from private equity coming in and being involved and taking an ownership stake in the hospital. It's because they're cutting costs in important places that previously would keep this from happening. Well,
and in my experience running startup companies using private equity funds, I can see how that, so we talk about when you're going out to VCs and getting funding, needing to find investors who have the same mission, values, core perspective that what you have. Because I have seen many companies completely go under when the VCs are like, look, we're just looking for our return on investment. So we're just looking for our ROI. We don't care about the mission. We don't care about the fact that you went into this to build this widget to change healthcare in a positive way. We don't care about that. We care about how much money we're going to get out. So we're going to push and push for you to make changes that might not align with what's in the best interest of the product that's being delivered. And I think that's the disconnect that you get in these instances. The motive of what success looks like is entirely different. And if success looks like the bottom line, then lots of cuts in inappropriate areas, training, the number of staff, the cleanliness, maybe you're going to do it the least expensive for janitorial services. And I mean, all of these types of things go down because the success metric has changed. The success metric is no longer the healing, making sure we reduce infection, making sure that's not what the success, it is keep the VCs happy so they keep financing and they're off our back. So this is what we'll do. And I think that really ties into those numbers.
No, you're spot on. And that's why a lot of times, like even in cases, when I look for private equity as a red flag, my next question is, what is the role of the historical founder or set of founders? Has the board of directors changed? How has the implementation, there is, listen, we need capital. We need capital to be able to sometimes to grow. But I think the main question is, has the mission been altered?
Right.
And a lot of times where I look there are when you see that something is moving in a certain direction and you see, like, as I said, a major board change, you see key, C-level, operators exiting. And that's where, it's like, cause they're not going to come out and say it, but I tend to, so where I tend to look is, and also what other investments do they have under, kind of in their portfolio. So they're again, like everything. I think that there are, good apples and bad apples. And I think the key is to determine, like you said, has the actual measuring stick changed? Have we altered that? Because unfortunately, sometimes, like I said, even with us, with addictionhelp.com, like we all knew going into this, there was an uncertain future of how we're like all the time and significant money that we've put into this. We knew that we don't have the game plan yet on that because we felt we have to create this product where people can go. We have to create it. And then we'll figure it out because the mission is to save lives, to alter the trajectory. It's like there's a million ways to monetize something, I think, down the road. But the key is we knew that there were areas where, like, I know, we look at it every month. We see, I know what we could sell all of those phone calls for. I know. And I, as much as it is painful to say, oh, you have to wait another month to reach certain revenue goals, there's also this extraordinary pride amongst the team of saying, we went another month and we said no.
I love that.
So it's like, it feels good now to the point you almost feel like you're a rebel of saying,
it
it's
is.
like,
and to be clear, I just binge watched again. As I mentioned, I'm a startup kind of junkie, and I really actually love software companies. And I just binge watched Silicon Valley again.
Oh, yeah.
So it reminds me of the episode where they're talking about bad money.
Yes.
And so here's the deal. I think there is nothing wrong with getting, and in fact, we'll need to get investors, and Rand, you need to get investors in that. There's nothing wrong with good money, people who are aligned with the mission, the overall mission. I've done this so incredibly successful in my previous company at Florence Healthcare. We had amazing investors, amazing board. Everyone, the mission and the core values were aligned the entire time. It was constantly about advancing cures. I mean, it was so amazing. And I've seen other instances where it's just been like, well, no, our direction's constantly changing because we're just going in the wind based off of where we might be able to get the next amount of money at something.
Yes, right.
That is not the recipe for
Mhm.
hitting that core mission.
No,
And
it's
your
not.
team, I mean, it's deflating to the team too, because the team is like, wait, I joined because of this mission and these
The mission is
values.
everything. Right,
Yeah,
right.
it is everything. And then to have, the individuals who are now coming in and funding things suddenly say, okay, well, we don't really care about that. Or we'll
Right,
put that on
right.
our website. It's how I say, we used to joke at Florence and say we were
Yeah.
never going to put our core values on the wall because we'd seen so many companies do that.
Yeah, completely.
And then people would laugh. They'd be like, that one says
That's
speak up.
absurd.
And if I speak up, I'm going to get fired. So
It's
why is
so
that
true.
what
Right. It's like a kiss of death to put it on the wall.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. And I will say, listeners, one of the things that I think was just so brilliant with Ryan Jones, who's still the CEO and co-founder of
Mhm.
Florence, is that every year, and I'm not sure if they still do this, I've been gone several years, but
Mhm.
every year we would have a retreat, and I got the opportunity, I was super blessed to be able to lead this a
Mhm.
couple of years, where we would, as a team, pull up our values and say, okay, do we still all, not as VC people, but as the
Right.
team, the people, right? Is this still our value? There were several times that we said, we're 3 years in and we need to change the wording on this or perspective, just like you
Absolutely.
did on your website, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So it's also kind of like, why paint them on the wall
Oh yeah.
when you have the ones that are solid? Like, you're always going to have this as our core thing, but then you
Absolutely.
have other things that we grow and improve upon as an organization if we're a
Yes.
healthy organization. And I think that is so critical. And you don't need a VC or funding. And I think when I see treatment centers that were once good that
Mhm.
then crash, it's because of this. There's been another hospital system has taken them over,
Yep. Mhm.
and new management, and then all the therapists are leaving and all of these
Completely.
things are happening. Huge red flags.
It is. It is. And it's like, and it is true though that, it mission, I do think that mission can shift. And I think that no different than like us growing up as people, companies grow up. They start to say, that when we came into this, I thought we were going to do this. I did not think we were going to try and go into streaming content kind of side on this. Our background's all in written SEO, written content on websites, explaining things, that way, visual oriented stuff there. But we felt really compelled to document stories, to use kind of, I would say, newer rich media platforms, not because they were like a direct response sort of thing, but because they're a great way to communicate your mission. They're a great way to put,
Absolutely.
it's like one thing for you to be out there with Rand and say what you say, but when someone comes and hears you and they hear us talking about it and they identify with us immediately, and then again, it's like there are things that will change, I think, but it's like if I have part of my like stake in this is to say to all of our team members, we're not going to sell calls. And if I come back on a Monday and I'm like, all right, everybody, so I was doing some thinking this weekend, and all of a sudden it's like, we could sell calls if they did this and this, and people can see right through that crap.
Yep.
And it's just like, that is when I always see people bail, because they can see that you don't have the backbone for this thing. And it's one of those things, like when we started out as addictionguide.com, and
Mm.
in 2021, a really renowned board certified doctor, Michael Levy, out of Las Vegas, passed away. He had owned addictionhelp.com for 25 years, and had done a ton of work in Las Vegas. He had there was a law firm that was handling the estate. I reached out to them. I said, I'd like you to share this with the family, if you don't mind, which is that you have an extraordinarily valuable web domain. There are a lot of people who will want it, and there are a lot of people who will offer a lot of money for it. I can't offer you that money level, but I can offer you a promise that we will honor Dr. Levy's memory, that we will put up front our belief system, and that we will hold firm to that. And you know, but I I don't begrudge you if you need to sell it. I want you to know it though. Please make sure if you're going to sell it that you sell it to the best who are offering the money for it.
Right,
Please,
right.
because it is part of his legacy in some ways. And we were extraordinarily blessed. I mean, we heard back about 6 months later that they had accepted our offer and decided to sell it to us to allow us to use it. But again, what came with that was Dr. Levy's history, Dr. Levy's life in doing this. It is embedded into it. It is another thing. And I think that's something that when you're building any company, that you're surrounded by people who carry the burdens of doing it the right way. And sometimes these little moments of saying, well, we promised so-and-so we would never do that, those can protect you from getting off your message, getting off of the mission. Like sometimes it's like, I told my mom when I was a kid, I'll never smoke a cigarette. My dad smoked. I'm not going to smoke a cigarette. Now, I did smoke cigars. I smoked. I didn't. I didn't smoke other things really that would have been expected, is probably from my background. But I didn't smoke cigarettes, and I still haven't. And it's one of those things where sometimes you make a promise and it lasts. And I would have liked to have been a little bit more rounded with the promise and say, okay, I'm not going to smoke. I was a little exact. It was kind of an addict normal thing we do. I said I wouldn't smoke cigarettes. It's like, well, that's not technically a cigarette. But I do think that like when you're coming up and you're trying to build a company and you're trying to build it in a way that honors doing things the right way, these little promises here and there, they start to be weights that you carry. And I'm not saying that you should be weighed down by making promises left and right to everybody about everything, but I'll tell you what, I know that people hold me accountable as a decision maker here and saying, I thought you said we wouldn't do XYZ, or I thought you said, they will repeat back to me.
Yes.
And I feel like that's, people in recovery will repeat back to me, people who speak into my world. Well, Chris, just remember you said this when you were at your lowest, like, oh, okay. And those moments where you tell somebody like what you're experiencing, and make those little promises, they stick with you, and they can be, I think, good, kind of like little markers to remind you of why you got into something in the first place. It wasn't, I know that the most important thing to me was like, if we could listen, am I competitive? Yes. I want us to do better than some of the people out there that I don't think are doing the right things I want to crush them. I'm not lying. Like I want to crush them because I know what crushing them means, which is that if
saving lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't blink at that for a second. It's like, we want to crush them. We're coming for you. Like, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it's not a vengeance thing. It's because we want to be so good at this that Google, that the people who use the site, that the people we're working with, both treatment centers, and as we build this out, the idea is that the treatment centers we work with, we want that relationship to be something that makes it a lot easier to understand what people offer. A lot of centers, I don't want just a list of features. I really want them to help people understand, like, why is it important that if you have, borderline tendencies, that you need dialectical behavioral therapy at a center.
Yes.
It's like, it's not just DBT. It's like, no, here's what we have, someone who is specialized in DBT. We have, by providing that kind of unique information, I think it makes it so that honestly, like, people that find these will be able to make decisions better. They're going to go to their website. They're going to them using their phone numbers. Like, I don't want it to go through us. I want us to be, a content platform, a place for people to a watering hole, kind of that kind of stuff. But I don't, again, it's just, and if we build that, I think we can also force treatment centers we could force them to be, if you want to be on our exclusive platform, like you can't buy your way onto us. So
you're going to have to step up your game.
Yeah. If you do, guess what? We'll give you a second look,
A couple of thoughts I have is one, Marsha Linehan, who came up with dialectical behavioral therapy, absolutely brilliant. And the thing about DBT, which is the acronym for it, listeners, is that if you listen to other episodes, you know what I'm going to say. I think everyone should learn DBT skills in middle school. I think they are so powerful to being, and some of the healthiest individuals I know. And in the beginning, DBT was for this borderline personality disorder. Yeah. And then suddenly we've realized, oh, wait, every single human being on the planet can utilize these tools to be a healthier, happier self. The other thing I want to tie to when you're thinking about treatment centers. So in episode 13, I talked with Chrissy Clark at Ripple Ranch. And we talked about the link between childhood trauma and addiction. Mm-hmm. And the reason I want to bring this up is that those treatment centers that offer, and actually Joshua Young for his Crave and Recovery episode, we also talked about when he went to treatment, he had the opportunity to try different modalities at his same treatment center.
Sure.
And I think that is so valuable for treatment centers to have, because individuals coming in, they may come in because they have a challenge with alcohol or drugs or something like that, right? But it's often not often. I can't say always.
Yes, but
it's always an
it's
underlying.
Always, right.
It's always an underlying issue.
It is, yeah.
It is, right? And then depending on that underlying issue, there are different modalities that are different techniques, different things to try. Journaling, meditation, mindfulness, all EMDR, eye movement resensitization. Desensitization.
Yeah.
I Google it every time and I know what it is. Okay.
I know.
There are all these different things to try. And I just, if I could impart to more and more treatment centers, being able to provide these in the beginning, Chrissy was telling me about another treatment center that when their clients come in, they're not, they need to know what's your alcohol drug consumption so that we can make sure you're detoxing safely. Okay, fine. But they said the very first thing they do is they try and figure out what's the underlying trauma. And then let's figure out how long of a program will set you up for success. So you're not in this reoccurring cycle. And I think that's powerful. And I also think, much to what you were talking about, changing and growing, at the very beginning, we were doing quarterly webinars and I was just like, oh, it's so hard to try and get people together. It'll be easier. I'll just switch it to a podcast. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? So not easier. And then in the beginning, I said, I had a friend, Rob from church, say to me, you need to start doing video podcasts. And I was like, Rob, I'm never doing video podcasts. Right, It's just not happening. I know I said never. I know I did. And then I had a guest who he then started hounding me. You need to start doing video podcasts so that people can see humans as humans and see the people behind the scenes in these situations who aren't here neither you nor I are here for the money.
No,
I do this 100% volunteer inside. I run a company when I'm not doing this. And yet we just want to offer that peace, hope, and the life to someone. If someone can listen and read or find a center that you're showing on there that will bring them healing and help rebuild the community around them, their family, their siblings, their neighbors, all of those things, then wow.
It's everything. It is. And I don't want to get into too much of the nuts and bolts of how we write content for our sites, but one main thing is something you just brought up, which is every search query. When someone searches on Google, every search query has a shallow want and then a primal need. So when we're creating content on a website, we a lot of times will say, what's the shallow want? Because you have to answer the shallow want. If you don't answer the shallow want and you skip to the primal need,
You'll never get there.
You won't get there. But we had my sister-in-law has worked in labor and delivery for a long time, and I asked her one time, what's the most asked question that new moms ask in in the delivery room? She said, why is the baby sneezing so much? That's the question. And I said, okay, I'd never heard that. That's interesting.
Me neither.
Right? Yeah. So I was kind of walking through, okay, well, what is that shallow want? Like, is it, is my baby sick?
Right.
What is the primal fear or the primal need? Is my baby going to die? That is it's a deep one. And so then I asked her the same question for men. What is the thing men ask? When can we have sex again? Right? So,
makes sense.
Well, and so I say, okay, what is the shallow thing? The shallow side of it is, when can we have sex? Right. What is the primal fear or the need? Am I ever going to have connection again? Am I going to be left behind? Do I still have a role here? It's so when someone asks, like, what are the withdrawal symptoms of hydrocodone, is, yes, I want to know that they're flu-like, and yes, I want to know that they're going to take X number of days, but really it is it going to hurt too much? Is it going to be too scary? It's so whenever we're looking at content, I just think that most of the time, getting beneath the surface of it and understanding what is someone asking that they're not saying. Most searches on the web are like that, and most of them are driven by fear. Vast majority.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I don't even know what our SEO ratings are, but this is all fascinating, and this is amazing.
Yeah.
So, Chris, is there something you were hoping we would cover today that we haven't covered thus far?
No, I just was excited to talk to you. Listening to your other shows and watching, I just thought I really enjoyed your perspective on this. And I do agree with your friend telling you that you need to do it on video. I think it's important that they can see, they can hear the light in your voice, but I think when the light in your voice matches the light in your eyes, there's something that changes. And I think it's, there's a lot of people putting content out, and I have to say, for all the listeners, Ange, you have it organized extraordinarily well, both from how to prepare for it, like from scheduling, from all of those things. And those things tell me so much about someone, and about, like, you're volunteering, doing this work and committed to this. When someone is volunteering and they pour that much into just scheduling, setting up something, planning for excellence, it really moves me, because it's like, that is what changes things. It is more times than not, I've seen more change happen from coaches and, in sports, and, from people who care, that want to help, than from necessarily the professionals in every space, because of the heart that's behind it. And I just admire what you're doing, and just the way you go about it, because I think it's really needed, and your voice is really needed. So I just appreciate getting to. And
now I have tears in my eyes.
It's true.
I have allergies. I definitely have tears.
No, it's true though. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, because people who are watching or listening are assuming this just came together. I clicked a button, you clicked a button, and we started. And it was like, no, there was preparation, there was thought. In fact, when we scheduled initially and I had to reschedule, it gave me time to go back and listen, more time and stuff. And I want you to know how appreciative I am of your commitment to this community, because we definitely need voices like yours, and you're sharing great thinkers, great speakers, with them. And it's but kudos for just the heart that you bring to it, given your background. I did my cyber stalking, obviously. So when somebody's achieved a lot, when somebody's achieved a lot, that's oftentimes when I see the least amount of effort kind of given to something. And obviously you're a high achiever in everything you do, and to carry that over to this, to bring the way the team reached out to me initially and get to speak with them, it embodies the core vision of what you're trying to accomplish. And I do think it's important, and I think it's important that people know how much time and effort you put into this, to doing it in a way that is kind of just lined with excellence.
That means so much. And listeners, there are a lot of quotes out there that say the kind word. You never know when someone's going to need to hear something. Chris, have had a horrible week in other areas of my life, and I needed that affirmation more than you will ever know.
I'm glad. So I genuinely mean it.
Such a gift.
No, seriously, I've just enjoyed. It's so cool getting to know you, just speaking with you, but also feeling like that is one of the best parts about this type of technology now, is we can feel like we get to know people.
Yes,
because it's not just these momentary clips. We can see when we both hit record initially. There's like this lingering thing. It's like that's when you really, and I do think people are responding to that more than they are this this overproduced sort of thing where it's lacking that heart. I do think that passion and zeal for the things that we care about are absolutely mission critical, and you absolutely have that. It's so obvious.
Thank you. Okay, so 2 things. First off, I will put in the show notes all the links that we've discussed, so please send me that journal article as well so I can review it. But if you will, 1, remind the listeners where they can find your information. And then it is a requirement, this podcast, I hope you brought your favorite motivational quote.
I do. I have 2 of them.
I will allow you to.
Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I have my favorite, but I have a backup just in case. But yeah, sure. So you can find all of our work at addictionhelp.com. We're on pretty much all of the social channels, usually as the Addiction Help as our name on there. So at the Addiction Help, except on Twitter/X, which we're Addiction Help HQ. But yeah, all of that's available at addictionhelp.com, and then postpartumdepression.org. Again, it's we're starting to get some cool stories we're going to get to share with folks who, were walking through something at the time, have come out on the other end, and we're really trying to follow up with people to share their stories after they make it through that process. Inspirational quote. It's one that my dad always told me. He attributed it to his boss at the time, who was an amazing CEO, named Jim Moran, of Southeast Toyota, where my dad worked for a long time. But it was, I believe, Ralph Waldo Emerson originally. So it was the future belongs to those who prepare for it. And I love the idea that in recovery, that we are constantly trying to prepare ourselves for the future challenges we're going to face, for the things that we may not be ready for. And so I think all the work that is done, whether it's gratitude work or, and I'm a huge believer in gratitude work, and just because it is we need reminders constantly that there are things going on that are amazing and good and unexpected from where we ever imagined life could be. But I really have always believed that, the more we can look into the future and say, what are the potential things? It's more than just a business thing. It's a life thing. It's how can we prepare our children? How can we prepare ourselves for that rough week, for that rough day? How can we build a strong fortress? That we have faith. There's a host of ways that, for me, are that's very personal, because when the future comes, a lot of times it does take you by surprise, and you want to be ready as much as you can. So honestly, that's I think that has been, and the second one is kind of one that my mom always said, which is my mom, just, it was a simple one, but just tackle your passion. She said, go after it.
Oh,
She's always been deeply passionate. She was the first woman scout in the NFL. And
wow.
yeah, she's so, but that was the thing. It was just go after it, hunt it, challenge it, go. Don't, don't tiptoe, just give it a go, and really go after it. So one from mom, one from dad. Each of those mean a lot to me.
That is beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I know you're incredibly busy. We didn't even talk about the fact you're in sunny Orlando, Florida, and I'm in sunny Los Altos, California. And yet technology can allow us to have this conversation, and it was absolutely amazing. I am incredibly grateful.
So am I. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today with your coffee and conversation. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. To learn more about today's guest, please check out our show notes for more details. Now it's time to remember to like this episode, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. Recovery Advocate Network envisions a world where individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigmas often present in society. We are proud that every individual worked with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by making a financial donation via PayPal or Venmo, or email donate@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org if you would like to donate items for our next fundraising auction. Please visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org to learn more. Now, stay in the loop about upcoming events, future episodes, and more by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, LinkedIn, and all major podcast platforms. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. How do you do that? Visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and in the top right corner, click that comment button and comment. So listeners, what do you need to do? Pause what you're doing, subscribe, follow us. Please give us a like and a 5-star rating, write some meaningful comments, and most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch, so please be a part of a reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and or if in the U.S., dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and or a safe, confidential path out of physical or emotional domestic abuse, please call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. Now, we know you are very busy, and we are grateful that you said yes to sharing time with us today. If you stuck to our 3 C's of engagement and listened to the full episode, then visit the podcast section of our website and leave the comment about the podcast, and you'll be entered to win an autographed copy of one of the books from one of our book club series, as well as a Coffee and Conversation coffee mug. So thanks again. Until next time, back to your coffee.